Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the October edition of ECGrid Presents, a monthly webinar series where B2B industry experts share insights on various topics of interest to the supply chain community. My name is Linda Moore, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, an experienced leader in the B2B technology world, currently supply chain consultant for RVCF, Paula Giovannetti. Paula will showcase proven processes and strategies that IT professionals should use when deploying emerging technology, regardless what the new system may be. So I encourage you to take this opportunity to ask her questions by typing them right in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen anytime during the presentation. As usual, you will all receive an email including a link to the on-demand recording of this session, as well as Paula's slide deck. Welcome back to ECGrid Presents, Paula. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. So, deploying emerging technologies, what an amazing time to be around, to be in business. When you think about artificial intelligence, of course, machine learning, blockchain, the metaverse with virtual and augmented reality, quantum computing, self-driving cars, and even for many, RFID is an emerging technology, as well as for some people EDI is, or certainly as we go to two-dimensional barcodes on the consumer package, we'll have the ability to provide a new consumer experience for somebody who just scans a two-dimensional barcode on a box of toothpaste. So some amazing things going on right now. Just a little bit of background on myself. I've worked in emerging technology since 1985, when it was also a very exciting time. So we had personal computers on the scene, the internet as we know it today. We had gaming consoles, mobile phones that turned into smartphones. So I taught some of the first adult education classes on personal computers at Gateway Technical College for several years. I had a business for many years that helped companies understand the latest technology, decide whether or not it was applicable for them at this time, and if it was, help them deploy the technology. I've been involved in national and international standards for 40 years, helped write technical specs translated into several languages. In 2020, I unsuccessfully retired and have been working with RVCF as a supply chain consultant since then. I'm a kayaker, so I kayak whenever I can, which in Minnesota isn't as often as I wish it was. But here we are kayaking the glaciers in Alaska in 2018. And this last May, I had the privilege of kayaking the Arctic Circle in Norway. It was amazing. So always up for trying something new. Let's talk about having some success with the next new thing. We're going to go through joining industry groups, making decisions on what to do, when to go, how to start, building a team, building a good foundation, having your own back technologically, communicating, documenting, training, and socializing with the rest of the enterprise, because this is likely where you'll increase your chances for success. So let's start with getting involved with industry organizations. And I can't emphasize this enough. If it's possible for you to find out the standards organizations that are meeting relative to things going on in your industry, I highly recommend that. They're made up of volunteers, the committees are. You will be meeting with your peers, your competitors, and your customers. You'll know what your competitors are doing because they're asking for capability and guidelines for the things that they're working on. It's a chance for you to help shape the future of your industry. And, I know these days we've all taken travel out of the budget, but if there's any way you can get it put back in for 1 or 2 meetings, I can promise you those face-to-face, one-on-one meetings are just so valuable. I mean, you'll create relationships, and these are people who return your phone calls, who will work with you on the issues between the two companies, or advice, for instance. So here's a picture of, if you're in retail or you're in grocery, you do EDI. And these are the folks that at one time or another, as we were designing in those implementation guides and those transactions, that were part of something called the Standards Maintenance Committee for the Uniform Code Council. We met 2 or 3 times a year. Every time we met, there were 200 or 300 suppliers and retailers in the room. I don't know that I can name a technology other than EDI that had that kind of, for retail and groceries specifically, had that kind of industry buy-in and cooperation. And I think that's probably why it still works well today. So we'd pretty much done our work and didn't need to meet regularly anymore. The American National Standards Institute maintains EDI, as does GS1 US for EDI transactions in the United States. So 4 or 5 years after our last meeting, 40 of us paid our own way to go to Gainey Ranch in Scottsdale so we could have supper together because we missed each other. And we still stay in contact today. In fact, if you think back to the picture of me kayaking the glaciers in Alaska, that was the EDI coordinator from BF Wrangler, and we're still very, very good friends. So those are the kinds of relationships you'll build if you get involved with your industry organizations. All right, let's talk about you've got what you've got now, not working as well as you wish it would. You've got something that would make it better, and that something that would make it better will almost always compete with the next, newest, untried magic thing. And so you may feel, I mean, you've done your due diligence, you've done your ROI, you know going to this new process would benefit the enterprise, but you keep thinking, well, maybe we should wait until this next newest thing is a little more tried and tested. But if you do that, you're always going to be waiting. So you make your decision. The new thing is going to involve a lot of hype and a lot of risk. So you decide if the first mover advantage is worth it for you, that extra risk is worth it for you. And if it is, then you go for it. But you need to know that you will be experiencing what's called the Gartner hype cycle adoption curve, which I like to call it the we love it, we hate it, we like it, we've got it working, and we've got it worked out. But just know what you're in for if you make the decision to go to the very latest. And if you want to try, if you just want to become conversant in the newest shiny thing, obviously what you can do is take an area of the company that's not working well, a department, a process, some small bit that needs improvement, and try out the new shiny thing and give it an end-to-end implementation in a very small instance. And if it's as promised and it does what you need it to do in your enterprise, then of course you'll make the decision to roll it out to even more departments and parts of the enterprise. When you're working on making the decision, when you have your spreadsheet, as we all do when we're making decisions, and you've weighed the pros and cons and they're equal, and you're looking at that kind of analysis paralysis thing that happens, pick one, because it probably means they're both right. They're both right. Just pick one, but succeed in the execution, because you can succeed or fail in the execution either way. So just pick one and go for it. Part of that success will be the team that you put together, multifaceted, cross-functional project team of decision makers with a project leader. And one of the ways that I've seen work very well is you pick a core team. So it might be 6 people or 10 people or 20 people, depending on how many areas in the company this is going to directly affect and how big the project is. But you have a team of core members that meet regularly. And then you surround yourself with an auxiliary team of subject matter experts. So that means you're going to identify somebody in maybe legal or accounting or facilities or marketing, and you'll keep those same people. They'll go for the ride with you. You'll meet with them maybe once every couple of months and just bring them along for the ride. So the nice thing about that is when they go back to their departments, they're going to have some idea of what's coming and what's going on, and they can think about how it's going to fit in and how it's going to work for them. But you keep the core project team meeting on a regular basis. One of the things that can happen, and we've all experienced it, probably with a homeowners association or a team or a bridge club or whatever it is, you've got someone or a couple of people in the group that are what I call that vocal minority. And it just starts to feel like they're the majority after a while because they've got something to say about everything. Don't always go along with what the rest of the group is. You get a lot of yeah, but gee, but yeah, but this and gee, but that. And that can be an impediment. So you need to get everyone's input, whether that's in the meeting or outside of the meeting. If you're having the same discussion, it feels like you've had several times before and you thought you'd made a decision and it keeps coming back, then call for a straw vote. How many people think A is the good way to go and how many people think B is a good idea? And if it's clear that there's a majority on one side, then you go with that and you move on. To me, a project team is like sled dogs. Okay, so you can have athletic and intelligent and good, capable sled dogs, but if you've got one or two pulling you off to the side, it's going to be an impediment. And so you're going to need to make a decision on what you're going to do about that vocal minority, and you might have to involve senior management. When the core team meets, every once in a while, invite guests to the meeting so you can explain whatever it is again and again. And don't get frustrated explaining it again and again from the beginning with the basics because you'll be doing a lot of that. In fact, that's how you know how your team feels about whatever it is you're working on, because it can either be, oh, I got to explain it again, or it can be, yeah, I get to explain it to somebody new. And so that kind of enthusiasm is also always valuable. And again, I think one of the most important things I've learned over the years is that you create a meeting schedule and you keep the meetings. So it's not, well, we're waiting for something to happen. There's really nothing to talk about. So-and-so can't make it anyway. Everybody's kind of busy right now. Let's just skip this meeting. Keep the meeting schedule, because you'd be surprised at how many times those meetings become the most valuable meetings. So let's talk about building a good and well-documented foundation. So I can't really think of any emerging technology today that doesn't rest on some sort of master data. And so it's very important for that data to be scrubbed, harmonized, and normalized in the existing system, because so many times you think, well, we'll fix it as we move it, or we'll fix it when it gets to the new system, or the new system's going to somehow magically fix it. But it is always best, of course, to fix the data in the existing system. And one of the most important things you'll do is to remove duplicates. Duplicates are always an issue. They skew the data, they skew the statistics. If you've got 4 identical records and you go in and update one and change one, and somehow it doesn't stay changed and it drives you crazy, it's because you've got duplicates in there. And one of the ways you can ferret out those duplicates is to standardize the abbreviations you use. And here's something, regardless of whether this is part of any kind of technology you're deploying, is if you have a name and address database and you use a package carrier, they are charging you every time your address says DRIVE instead of DR, not DR period, DR, if those are their rules. So it might be good for you in any event to go back and go through your name and address data to make sure you're following the abbreviation guidelines of your package carriers, or it's costing you thousands of dollars a year or maybe even a month. But you do the same thing for the descriptions. You look at the abbreviations you use, capital SAINT, capital ST period, capital ST. So you normalize those. You have, if say the database is about items, then you might want to, you do want to create a taxonomy for the name for that item, the description for that item. So it's a bolt. This is the type of bolt it is. This is the material it's made out of. This is the size. You determine the order in which you want that information to be in the name of the item. You may want to put together a data dictionary. I've seen some incredible data dictionaries, and they are so valuable. And so that's, if here's the name of the attribute, here's an example of it, here's the length, here's the data type, because you need to make sure those are going to be the same across all the systems that this data will go through. So it's going to be alpha, or it's going to be numeric, or it's going to be a date type. You want to make sure, especially, the data length is the same. So if you start out in a database where the description is 40 characters, and the next database you go to, it's only 20, and the database you go to after that, as you stream through your systems, is back to 40, the data is going to have fallen through the cracks. So you want to make sure the length for that data element is the same in all the systems. I always like in that data dictionary spreadsheet to put in a column that's got metadata in terms of, if you don't know enough to call it by whatever common name you've given it in the spreadsheet, these are the other terms and concepts and words you would use to look for that attribute. And then you're going to list all the systems that attribute will show up in, including what they call it in those systems, because they never call it the same from one system to another. And then finally, you're going to create and you'll have a notes column in there somewhere that says, yeah, we used a field that really isn't right, but nobody was using it, so we used it. It's almost always one or two of those. And then you're going to list who's the department who's responsible for the accuracy for that data attribute. So it might be accounting, it might be R&D, it might be legal, whoever it is, that's the department that's responsible for the accuracy of that attribute. They're wonderful things to have. So designing the new system. And there is an element of design in whatever it is you do, because even if it's not programmable customization, it is configuration. I mean, every software, every system that you're going to deploy will have the ability to configure it in multiple ways, or nobody would ever sell it. Okay, so there's always different ways to configure that system and that information. And you're going to have internal customers that'll imagine all the things that they might need someday, just in case. And it's really important, very important, to make them justified. So somebody will come along and say, well, we need this because we might need this and this might happen. And I'd always say, that's no problem. That'll be $50,000. And they'd usually say, oh, well, I didn't want it that bad. So the point is, you just need to make sure they understand that there's a cost associated with that. And so they need to justify it. Part of it is because that kind of excessive customization or configuration makes it difficult to upgrade the system. And it makes it harder to use the training tools that are available for it. So again, always justify that. Document the decisions that you made and why you made them. Why you made them. It's so important. Because 2 and 3 years from now, when somebody comes along and wants to do it the other way and wants to know why you did it the way you did it, the folks that designed it, made those design decisions and implementation decisions, likely aren't around anymore. And so you need that documentation to indicate why you did what you did and the decisions that you made. And here's another one that I think is so important and not always put on the to-do list for a project team, and that is creating an archive strategy. Seems kind of interesting before you even start a new system to create an archive strategy for it. But we talk about archive, we're talking about hot, warm, and cold data. So here's the stuff I need in the kitchen because I use it every day. Here's the stuff that's on a shelf in the basement because I go to get it once or twice a year. Here's the stuff that's in a box in the attic because I might not ever need it. So that's the archive strategy that you're going to look at. There are people who do this for a living, especially if you're on SAP, especially if you're on SAP. And that data has the half-life of uranium, 4.5 billion years. It's an invasive species, and you may need some help when you're going through the archiving process. Because here's what happens. Every enterprise hopefully should have corporate data retention policies. Because legal wants you to get rid of it as soon as you legally can. They don't want it around for discovery. And now, especially with AI, because they're looking for the biggest bucket of data they can get their hands on, and they want to keep everything forever so that they can go back and analyze it. So you need to make decisions about those, and probably that involves a conversation with legal, so that there'll be some decisions to make in that area. Having your own back technologically, and most companies do this. Every once in a while, I'll work with a company whose decision has been, if something goes wrong, they'll figure it out then. So you're working without a net, just so you know that. It's dangerous and get bloody. The best thing, obviously, is to be prepared for a fallback or a go back process. So fallback means the data is corrupted. You processed a date twice, you didn't process something at all, the data length got you for some reason, but the data is corrupted and it can't be fixed. And you need to go back to the date at which that data was correct, and then apply the transactional data that's happened from that day forward. A go back plan means it's the system that's corrupt, and you need to go back to the last working iteration of that system. Because when you have a tenable and tested go back plan, it helps you sell the idea in the beginning. You're going to show how you'll reduce risk and you'll recover if you need to. But the most important thing is to get the budget dollars before you even start the project. Build in the budget dollars for creating the mirror testing sandbox environments you will need for this, because it's not cheap, but you need to build that into the budget so that you don't get pushback when the time comes and you need to use those mirror systems for testing or for training. And for that, you need to understand backups, your corporate policy for backups. And is the data backed up is not the question you want to ask. The answer is always going to be yes. The question you want to ask is, how far back does it go? Oh, you overwrite the data every month. That's good to know. How hard is it to retrieve? How expensive will it be to go get it? How long will it take? Does somebody need to sign off? Is there actually somebody who might say, no, we don't have the resources to do that? And you review the data before you use it to replace existing data. So again, you're going to need the parallel environment to test overlaying the current data with the backup. But you always want to really understand how far that's backed up and how hard it is to go get. So when push comes to shove, and it might, you hit a roadblock, it's something you didn't see coming, you're behind schedule, you're over budget, and you just need to fix it behind the curtain with some usually kind of human interface. A person's going to kick off a process. Something's going to happen manually in order to get the data to flow or the process to work. So if you have to kludgy it now to get it to work, you do. But at that point, you create a plan, you determine the resources and the plan itself, what you're going to do to fix it, and get the budget now for when you're going to be able to go back in 4 months or 6 months or whatever it is and fix what it was that you had to kludgy to get the system deployed. Because it's not your job, right, to get it to work once. You're responsible for a sustainable and successful deployment end to end. So if you've got to do something to make it work now, just make sure now is when you create the plan to fix it as soon as you can. So let's talk about training and documentation. Nobody hears mom's voice anymore, but it's going to be one of the most important things you do. It's change management, right? That's the myth, I think. Employees don't like change. Well, I don't know. Employees always like it when things are better, and every once in a while they like a change or maybe something new. But I do know is employees don't like not knowing what they're doing. Employees don't like not being able to do their job well and right. And so that's why the training and documentation is so critical. I think back on it now, I don't know, do you remember when we'd sit in a classroom situation, somebody would come in to do the training, and it was very expensive, and we'd have books and screens, and that's how we'd learn whatever the new system or whatever it was we were doing. I always remember sitting there thinking, this must be what it's like to learn how to bowl by reading about it. Because sooner or later you have to throw the ball to learn how to bowl. And that's what all those classroom situations quite often felt like. But I think we're pretty much probably done with that, because today folks much prefer self-serve training, right? When they run into an issue, they want to be able to look up what they need to do, or when they're new, they need some kind of onboarding and learning. And today when the toilet breaks, we go look up a YouTube video to see how we're going to fix it. So videos will certainly be a part of training and documentation. You need job aids for very specific roles, which will include screen grabs and step-by-step instructions. Again, those may be in a video, but they probably should be in paper at this point, because you're going to check off and you're going to follow along with it as you're doing whatever task you're doing. You need a glossary of terms and concepts, because the super users and the folks that have been around it for a while are going to start using nicknames and terms and acronyms. And so you certainly need that glossary of terms and concepts for the new folks. And the data dictionary here is applicable, of course, as well. And those training documents need to be written in business language. And I know that sounds obvious, but you don't know how many times I'll go into a company who said, not working as advertised, got a little bit of a mess. Can you come help us sort it out? And so the first thing I ask for is the documentation. And I find a bunch of technical specification templates that are not even always filled in. So again, you need to make sure that those documents, those training documents, are written in business language. And once again, at the beginning of the project, put in a fairly large budget for documentation. Because it takes somebody doing it and testing it, and it takes time, and you want to be budgeted for it. So all those documents should have on the document the last date it was updated. So you make sure you're working with current information. Every one of those documents needs to be assigned an owner, so either a department or an individual. And it's their responsibility every year or every couple of years to review those documents and make sure they're still current. And the people depending on those are using current information. And here's one that's kind of fun that we've done in a couple of places. And that is, a couple of months after deployment, hold an open house, preferably somewhere where there's food and beverages. So advertise from 1 to 4 on Wednesdays. There'll be a table set up and thus and so, and there'll be experts or super users, just folks who get the system, love the system. Those are your super users, and you really need to rely on those folks. So they'll be sitting at the table, and folks can just walk up and ask questions and give suggestions and so on. So you just have a little open house about the new system. You're also going to be interested in socializing that, and you start out with senior management usually. And it's subtle, but I found it so important to your success. So at some point in the deployment of whatever this is, you are no longer asking for anyone's permission, especially when you talk to senior management. They quite often feel compelled um, to tell you how things should go or should be done. And it's subtle, but it's an attitude. You're not asking for permission to do it. You're doing it. You have an approved budget. You have a project plan. Here's what it's going to do for your team and for the enterprise. You're just asking them to help make it amazing. So at some point, you're no longer asking for permission as you socialize it. You also may choose to gather a room full of people. So it's the folks in business operations that will be, boots on the ground when it comes to using the new system. So you're going to have a cross-functional meeting, explain to them what it is, when and how and why. I might add in here, if part of the new system is going to involve staff reduction, then that's something you want to work with the departments so that those conversations can be had within the departments and with those supervisors. If the end game in the new technology you're deploying is not staff reduction, then this is certainly a place that you can explain that, because probably most of the people in the room are thinking, not listening to what you're saying, but wondering if it means they're going to lose their job. So you really want to address that in some way up front. Then here's a fun thing. I've seen this work. It's a lot of fun. You ask them to brainstorm about what they can do to make it fail, not what can go wrong or what they can do to make it a success, because you get crickets most of the time, or you get cliches, or you rarely get something that's actionable. But if you can get them, and you have to start with some examples. I mean, they think it's a trick question. But if you can get them engaged and you can get them going and make it a little fun, we could do this and we could do that. And then you've got a list, and it makes them think about things that you don't want to do to make it fail. And it gives you a little bit of a watch out list as well. And then, of course, you're always going to bring the meeting back to the positives about, the good things it's going to do and why we're looking forward. So here, the secrets to success are pretty straightforward. You're going to put together a team that respects each other enough to argue, listen to each other, trust the subject matter experts. When a decision is made, you move on. You're going to concentrate on training and development and maintaining that training and development. And don't quit when it gets hard, because it will. It will. You'll run up against something it's going to seem impossible. You're going to need creativity. You're going to need that team to stick together and work with each other, and just don't quit when it gets hard. So there we are. Comments, questions?
Excellent. Thank you, Paula. We'll keep it right here. We do have a couple of questions, and we invite others to please type in your questions right in the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom screen. But here's the first question, Paula. What is one mistake you still see some experienced project managers make when adopting a new technology?
Well, project managers are a special lot. It's the classic manage without authority. So you're quite often in a way managing folks that are way above your pay grade. So it's a skill set. It's important that a project manager have that skill set. When the project starts out, you spend time creating a mission and scope. And then so often you put it in a drawer and you're done with that. You've accomplished that task. But you really need to revisit it and review it on a pretty regular basis, just to say, are we still on task? Does this mission and scope still make sense for us? Documentation, again, is so important. I think I think you need to assign somebody, preferably not somebody on the team, assign somebody to take notes and to keep track of that documentation, because it's impossible when you're running a meeting to also take those notes for that documentation. And the other thing, and this is going to be a little controversial, I know it's all the rage now with AI bots and recording. We're recording this to record your meetings. But I just want you to think about and be sensitive to the fact about, does that bring an unwanted guest into the room? And is that in any way going to stifle discussion and creativity? So just think about whether or not you really want to record those meetings, and you may decide that there's an advantage to it, and you might decide to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, I think you touched upon it at the very beginning of your presentation, but what specific standards work is going on in retail and grocery today?
Oh, that I can help you with. I put a slide in just for that. So this is the current work that I know of that's going on in retail. So primarily for retail, the standards would be GS1 Globe, which creates the standards that we all follow. I do have to insert in here right now that GS1 considers their guidelines to be voluntary. And so that's important, especially in the US where we have non-compete laws, that they are voluntary. But you've got GS1 at the globe level, and then you've got member organizations at the country levels. So we've got GS1 Globe and GS1 US. So GS1, and you'll get a copy of the PowerPoint. So here's a link that you can click on for the fairly new two-dimensional barcodes, QR codes, or data matrix codes that we'll be putting on the consumer package, and that can be used at point of sale to get priced to do in effect the same thing the UPC code does now. But obviously the advantage of those two-dimensional barcodes is they can hold more information. They can bring you to a URL that can provide a customer experience about whatever that product is. So and in Europe, they're adopting it much more quickly than we thought they would. So that's interesting. I think mostly that's because they work in several languages, and we're just out of real estate on the consumer package if you have to put everything in 2 or 3 languages. So two-dimensional barcodes have taken off in Europe, and we're starting to see activity on that here. Also at the global level, and this is if you're in any kind of transportation or supply chain, there's something called Scan for Transport. Basically a QR code that sits in the upper right-hand corner of that GS1 logistics label. And for those of you who are familiar with it, there's a serial shipping container code down at the bottom in a linear barcode. And that's how we automate receiving, is using an EDI ship notice and that label. But the Scan for Transport QR code goes in the upper right-hand corner, and it's just, it can be configured so that you don't need internet. You certainly don't need to be behind anybody's firewall. So it's for that last mile delivery. So it's for the driver to say, here's the do not deliver before date. Do I need a signature? Is there hazmat information that I need to know about? Excuse me, we just approved specificity for latitude, longitude, and altitude in that QR code for drone delivery. So the drone can read it and know how to deliver it. So it's basically free once you've streamed the data and configured it on your logistics label. It has to go anyway. It's going to have that serial shipping container code in it, and the QR code always, you can damage a QR code and still read it, which you can't do to that linear code down at the bottom. So it's amazing. If you have anything to do with logistics, that's worth it. GS1 US is working on a pilot project for exchanging sustainability certifications, because that's really what we're looking at now is a lot of new things in sustainability. So to standardize the language that's used for those certificates and being able to exchange information between the brands and the retailers. One of those, of course, is extended producer responsibility, which puts the responsibility for designing eco-friendly products and the cost of product recycling on the suppliers, and there are states that have already started to implement this. So we have a number of things going on in sustainability, and GS1 US is working on that. If you're interested in RFID, there's a RVCF in conjunction with AIM, the standards body that does RFID guidelines and standards, technical specifications. We worked with them to create an RFID FAQ specifically for retail, and there's a link for that. There's work that GS1 globally is doing on traceability, and some very important FDA work that GS1 US is doing now on food traceability, and that's become a law. That's not voluntary. Those are things that if you're working with food, you're going to have to know about. So those are the current things that right now that we're working on in retail.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much, Paula, for sharing all of these valuable tips with us, and to everyone on the call. If you click the link that's in the chat right now, you'll see some information about our next webinar, which is happening on Wednesday, November 12th. ECGrid's own Tony D'Angelo will be talking about using AI agents to predict and prevent supply chain disruptions. I'm sure it's going to be a really interesting discussion, and we'd love for you to join us. Feel free to invite colleagues and friends as well. But before that webinar, the RVCF Fall Conference will be held in Scottsdale. That's in Arizona from November 2nd to 5th. This is RVCF's 25th year. Is it not, Paula?
It is. We're having a birthday party.
That's amazing. Well, first of all, congratulations to you and all of your team. You do such incredible work. If you have never been to this conference, I highly recommend attending. Just lots of information, collaboration, and networking. And if you need help with registrations or just getting rooms at the resort at the discounted rate, I believe the date has passed, but we may be able to help you out there. Reach out to Paula directly on LinkedIn. So we appreciate you being with us today. Look for the on-demand recording of the session in your inbox next week. And as always, if you have any questions or want to chat with anyone at ECGrid, just reach out to us at info@ecgrid.com. So that's it for now. We will see you next time.